please, or make the roll call, please.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, we're waiting for the chair. Phil Ralston.
Here.
Ariana Johnson. Kayla Calkins.
Here.
Nick Lane.
Here.
Eric Mueller.
Here.
Heather King.
Here.
Winta Johannes. And Dan Eisenbeis.
Here.
All right, we do have a quorum.
Great. With that said, my understanding is we will not be making any decisions tonight. So this is a work session, informational and discussion. But also with that, I'd like to invite anybody from the public to make comments if comments are to be made. Emily, do you have anybody that's notified you of an interest in commenting?
I don't.
No? Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll just get right to it. And this is a Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Board work session focused on strategic planning and level of service project. And with that, I'll just open it up to Colin to introduce this topic and walk us through the agenda and what you hope to get out of today.
Thank you so much, Director Ralston. Appreciate you all being here this evening to talk about strategic planning. I'm Colin Rowan. I'm the Director of Planning and Public Affairs, and joined today by Matt Berlin, who is the district's emergency planner. He is also the project manager for this, and you'll also see him as the project manager for the facilities plan and coming up with the July meeting for our emergency operations plan. So, and then also here today for this effort is Andrew Riggs. He is the district's asset management specialist. He is the technical lead for level of service, which is a really important part of this effort to really be able to have performance measurements, making sure that we're able to report on how we are doing. So the purpose of this meeting really is a kickoff for our strategic planning work. We are currently in the moment where we're implementing on a decade of hard work, and we have an opportunity to really focus on some core initiatives. And so our primary goal of having this work session is really to kick off this work. It is to provide and establish a foundation of understanding for the board on the project, and we are looking for your feedback. We want to know any comments, feedback on that foundation, how the pieces fit together. And so we do want this to be conversational. So we'll be taking purposeful pauses, making sure there's room for conversation. So it is not an interruption. If you have a question in the middle of anything, we want to make sure that this is more conversational. And do want to note, this is a work session. There is no board decision being made. There's sort of a misnomer in the memo where it says no action requested. Really what we're looking for is a collaborative conversation. So that would be the action that board would, the staff would really appreciate. So just as far as the agenda for this evening, I'm going to kick this off just providing a little bit of a vocabulary centering to make sure that we're all using similar language. I think that will be beneficial. I will stop for a moment to see if there's anything that is working or not working for board members and make any adjustments there, provide a little bit of background, and then Matt's really going to take over to provide a bit of a framework that we're developing for all of our plans to fit into a more comprehensive framework that will really be able to drive the strategic efforts of this board. So let's get started. Matt, will you please go to the next slide? Start with the first one. So I did want to start by talking about some of this terminology. And I think it's important because there's a lot of different kinds of strategic planning efforts that take place, right? Some are, big long range type things. Some of them are really kind of short term, try to get certain efforts around. And so I wanted to just ground us all in similar language that we'll be using. It's in the current RFP that we have for strategic planning, and it's how we plan to work with you as the board on this. So really, this strategic plan is to outline your goals and the district's goals and priorities over a 5-year period. And so this should be a focused effort, right? And so it's really to help us narrow as staff, narrow our focus on the initiatives that the board really wants us to accomplish and drive forward on. We can go to the next one, please. So comprehensive plan, and you'll see this discussed, and there's some nuance here. This is a capital C, capital P plan. This is something that our next planning cycle will build up to. It is a 20-year plan that will align all of our statutory purposes, the mission, vision, values, and then there would be strategic plans on about a 5-year cycle that would really focus initiatives to make sure that we are making solid progress on a broader comprehensive plan. Go to the next one, please. But what we're currently doing is really working on ways that we can align all of our current planning efforts. In the next slide, I'll touch on some of the plans that we currently have going. We want to make sure that those are all aligned and at different levels. And so plans, programs, and projects being focused on core services that are statutory purposes of the district. And so a comprehensive framework is one of the outcomes of this effort really over the next year that we'll be working with the board on. Next slide, please. Levels of service is something that is really important both for you all as the board. They provide benchmarks to say how much of any service, flood safety, environmental benefit, any of the services that we provide, it provides a way of actually measuring it and making sure that we are effective in providing that service. So it is something that drives budget decisions. It is something that drives the way that we communicate with the public, and it's something that really drives the way that we work together. Go to the next slide, please. And then the key performance indicators is another key piece of terminology that we'll be producing out of this. This is really our way of talking with you, the board, as well as within staff and with the public that demonstrate how we are actually meeting those levels of service. So we'll set a level of service that could be a certain, that the system is ready for a certain level of storm. The key performance indicators will be those measurable values that would demonstrate how we're achieving that objective. Next slide, please. Then you go to first, there we go. So at the highest level, why do we plan? And so you can go deep on some of the philosophy of these pieces, but the most simple version is that we plan for accountability and transparency, and planning ultimately provides us with a roadmap, an action plan for how we're going to move forward. So through that planning, we create a roadmap, and go to the next, thank you. And just want to note, and it's in the memo, but we are currently implementing a really great set of plans that we've been developing over the last 10 years. And so those plans are the result of a lot of effort. And they include the work that Levee Ready Columbia, so a broader partnership of different community members, municipalities, and federal partners have provided. That Levee Ready Columbia effort not only resulted in the creation of the new district, but it also did the first ever thorough, full technical analysis of the levee system and let us know sort of where improvements were needed. We also are drawing our current projects from the Portland Metro Levee System project with the Army Corps of Engineers, strategic asset management plans, the flood emergency action plan, natural hazard mitigation plan. We every couple of years, we work with the Army Corps of Engineers. They basically provide a report card that's through the Rehabilitation and Inspection Program. And so all of those different planning products all go into our current CIP. And so the other piece that is in there is in our current CIP are commitments to voters that we made through the general obligation bond, as well as projects that meet our statutory mission. And so we have those plans which provide a roadmap of what we need to implement, but through the strategic planning effort, we have this opportunity to really focus on particular initiatives and priorities that look forward and give sort of a horizon that is much more attainable, and also provide us with the opportunity to really make progress on the broader set of purposes that our district has. And so finally, we want to continue to strive for service delivery optimization. That is something that we are creating and implementing, and through the strategic planning effort, we'll set the course. I do want to stop here. I actually did mean to stop at the terminology slide and see if there's any questions. And actually, Matt, maybe it would be helpful if you flip back up to the terminology slide, if that is not too quick. Just wanted to see if there was any input thoughts on this. I do want to note the lowercase comprehensive framework can be talked about in other ways. It is basically a agency or organizational planning framework, and just, you know, the key part of it is not around a single plan or a single program or project. It really is about how all of those pieces fit together. If there aren't any questions on this, and I do want to just, you know, if anything isn't fitting quite right, you can definitely follow up with us, and we can have further discussion. And Matt, maybe if you just go down to the next one.
Paul, if I could interrupt.
Please do.
Yeah, this is a good time to ask questions, I think, about things like, you know, is a strategic plan, the 5-year planning horizon, is that acceptable to board members? Did you have different expectations? Is this construct of a comprehensive plan with a 20-year horizon, does that kind of meet your expectations, or is it clear? This is a good time to really kind of look into the foundational elements of this, because once we're rolling, things like changing the planning horizon will be, you know, difficult to do.
I
Thank
guess
you,
in
Director
that
Ralston.
vein, oh, sorry.
No, please go.
In that vein,
Colin,
though,
I'll
I
let
guess,
you go ahead and organize the discussion, Colin.
Thank you.
I guess that made me think of an assumption, which I should probably clarify, which is that because this is all nested and it's looking at different time horizons, even with on a yearly basis within capital improvement plans, or the ways that we're moving through projects. My assumption is that's how we would keep a finger on the pulse of like yearly progress, and that these levels of service and KPIs would help support our understanding of how well we are moving towards that kind of larger strategy that we've set for ourselves. So is that a correct assumption, or should I think about that different?
That is, so why don't I start, and then Matt and Andrew, if you have anything else on especially level of service piece. But for to be able to report back to the board, the 5-year strategic plan horizon is specific. We want to be able to come back to you as we're developing the next year's budget, but throughout the year, really, to be able to communicate how we are making progress on the initiatives that the board said. These are our strategic priorities. And so the way to do that is by setting the level of service and having these key performance indicators. We're able to report back to you, to the public and others, objectively how we are doing. And so even if it means that we're not accomplishing all of those, we'll be able to talk that through and be able to describe sort of where our progress is. The kind of taking it in bites approach is that there's every year there's the ability to be able to communicate on those strategic initiatives, making sure that aligns with the CIP and the projects that we're implementing. And then every 5 years, that strategic initiatives can be updated to help kind of focus where the board priorities are. And then the broader comprehensive plan is we have a broader set of objectives. We have core competency and flood safety that we have to deliver. What is our trajectory over the next 20 years to make sure that we are making good on those commitments? Matt or Andrew, is there anything else?
I do. I want to save my most of my comments for the slides, but I do want to just maybe hit on a couple of points here. First of all, is kind of what we're talking about with terminology is what the convention is, and typically a 5-year strategic plan. That's usually the planning horizon. It should really be tailored to our needs, and I want to encourage the board that part of this project is allowing us all to have some authorship over what these tools are and how we tailor them for our needs. So I do think it's important that we think about what a strategic plan intention is, and if we need to make it a 2-year plan so we can get some thinking done, that's okay. The next thing I want to say is just about forming these tools. The concept of maturation is really important. We shouldn't be afraid to be in an early maturation stage and really embrace what that means and where we need to go next. That allows us to progress in a positive direction and keep things moving. So I will get into the details with the next series of slides. I want to make sure Andrew has a chance to talk about levels of service too.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and thanks for the question.
I'm going to interrupt for just a sec.
Please.
It's Phil. 2 quick comments real quick. One is we just got notice that Chair Stegman's not going to be available at all tonight. So Jim and I and Colin will be presiding, I guess, collectively here. The other thing is we do have a guest, Mr. Frank Stevens from Troutdale, and I want to extend him the courtesy of being able to ask clarifying questions at the end of each of the sections after our discussions around the structure or the terminology we're using. So he has an opportunity to follow more closely what we're talking about if he needs some clarification. I'll leave it at that. Mr. Stevens, if that's something that you would like to participate in at the end of each of these sections to ask some clarifying questions, please feel free to let Colin know.
That would be awesome.
Is that
Thank you, Chair.
Is that okay with the group? Okay. Given the fact that you've taken the effort to be here and to learn about this, I'd like to make sure that you have the courtesy of being able to, stay on board and ask questions as needed. Go ahead, Colin.
Thanks, Director Ralston. And I think Andrew is just going to say one thing on level of service and then go over to Director Eisenbeis.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so levels of service, as you said, these things are nested, and levels of service is also nested. So we can look at service delivery in terms of, we're going to use an example tonight that's preparedness to respond to emergencies. And we could have a strategic objective of what that looks like and what that means. And then the KPIs in that allows us to report on how well we're delivering that service. And then a program could have its own KPIs or its own objective to meet those KPIs to move that program forward. I think one thing that we can discuss is there's what the existing levels of service that we're delivering now are, what level they're at, and then there's our aspirational levels of service. So I'm gonna use a really silly made up example. Let's say the levees offer 100-year level of protection, which is not correct, but it's a round number, so it's easy. And the boards say, we'd like to offer 500-year level of service. We're not going to get there today, right? That's not where we're at. That's our aspiration. Maybe it'll take us 50 years to get there in the comp, in a comp plan. And so we're going to be able to report along the way on progress towards that aspirational goal. And as we learn and as we grow as an organization and we get used to, because reporting KPIs to the boards and to the public isn't something we've done in the past, as we become more mature and more sophisticated in this process, that reporting mechanism is going to be refined and become more nuanced and more powerful over time in terms of its precision and how it links to the services that we deliver. And that in and of itself is going to be a process. I think that where that differs into looking in the strategic plan is we probably can't move the needle on everything as far as we'd like all at once. And so we're going to need direction. If we have limited resources, we have to pick 2 of these 5 things. Where would the board like us to focus on in this round of priority? So I think, sorry, a little sidetracked with the continuing conversation and not used to operating in this environment, but I think that that's ultimately the goal. And so we're definitely going to be learning this along the way. Like we have a good basis of understanding, but we're going to be refining this and working with the boards along the way to make sure that it's meeting your expectations and needs and helping really inform the work that we're doing in the organization. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Andrew. Director Eisenbeis?
I have a question related to levels of service, and apologies if you touched on this earlier. Does staff have a recommendation or vision for how long levels of service that we identify would be expected to endure, and how often the board or the district might revisit levels of service in the future?
Andrew, why don't you take that, please?
Yeah, thanks for the question. There's a lot of different ways that we can approach it, and it's really working with you, the boards, to understand what satisfactorily meets your needs and expectations. We're proposing that we nest it into the strategic plan. So as I would approach levels of service as a living document. It's not something that should change really frequently, but it's a dial that you as the boards can like turn up this service or be like, oh, that was too much. We need to back down a little bit. And so in this 5-year period of strategic plan, if that's what we decide to land on, I think at least in that frequency, I would recommend that we revisit that and check and say, hey, is the level that was determined last time still meeting the needs and expectations of the public in terms of the services that we deliver? And if not, we can adjust that. And when we make that adjustment, we can then look at that planning horizon for the following 5 years to adjust investment to reflect that new level of service. That's would be my recommended approach. Yeah.
And so I think that recommendation is a nice segue back to some of the good kind of terminology check-in questions, and we can revisit this. But start off with, does that 5-year planning horizon sound good, at least at this time? And we can refine it later, but at least for moving forward, does that sound good to the board?
I think oh, sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Oh, please go ahead.
The note up front on us being the maturation process being long and this being newer for us, that was the only thing that caught my ear relative to like an iterative approach. So there's the question of how much effort goes into a 5-year plan and how drastically does it change each time we revisit it, right? And I guess something on my mind, and someone said 2 years, and I don't know if that's the right increment, but how could our ultimate goals be serviced by us having a quicker cycle to learn from early on versus where do we feel really confident that a 5-year view would be appropriate for our understanding of our own, operations. So it's probably more of a question for staff and their experience in this realm.
I can offer, so I think industry standard might be 5 years, but we had talked about, a 2, 3, or 5-year cycle initially, because we are doing other sort of formative planning efforts that this is synchronized with. So that the big one that is statutorily required is the watershed improvement plan. And the plan would be after some of these sort of foundational planning efforts come together, a comprehensive plan would sort of come out of that at sort of the 20-year horizon, or whatever planning horizon the board would choose. And so there is, I think, an option for a shorter initial planning horizon, and then going into sort of a more standard 5-year cycle. So say 3 years for the initial one, and then 5 years after that.
What level of cost is associated with the strategic plan cycle, both from a resource and money standpoint?
That is so for the current effort, it is a combination of the level of service work and the strategic planning effort. So that is $200,000. And so that doesn't mean that that's the amount for, that's the kind of foundational one. But I would also have to caveat that, prices in 3 years aren't going down, right? And so it's kind of an unknown, but just to sort of calibrate or ballpark it, a couple $100,000 over the course of about 18 months.
I guess where my mind goes, and I'm curious to hear from others, I know I'm speaking quite a bit, but is what is the cost relative to the potential opportunity cost for learning and iteration in a shorter plan versus the cost of running the cycle more quickly, or I'm sorry, over more periods of time if we did a 2 and a 2 and then went to the 5-year cycle, for example. So what are we gaining from giving ourselves the opportunity to learn quickly to deliver against our mandate better, if that's possible? That's the type of things that are on my mind.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you. I think I'll offer a thought there, and then it looks like Jim has as well. My initial thought on this is that we are currently implementing a good deal of work while we're going through this planning effort and wanting to make sure all those things fit together. And so I think we could actually have something that is pretty well scalable, that we're saying is basically a 3 to 5 year strategic plan, where you as the board, if things are still sort of in process or there's a delay on something, that could be flexible. So we could sort of start at that sort of shorter planning horizon as the goal, and then have some flexibility. But pass it over to Jim.
These are really good questions. Thank you. I think about the capital program differently than I think about the watershed plan. We have a set of projects that are going to take us at least 10 years to deliver, that are the result of really deep planning and risk-based analysis. So that's an area that's relatively mature. The KPIs on delivery and costs and efficiency in delivery are what we need to focus on. When it comes to the watershed plan, we'll have more information in a year that will require an update in that realm. And I think our facilities plan is in that same boat. So there may be different scales depending on which decision. And I think we're going to need to revisit some of the new program areas in our facilities plan sooner, then we may need to revisit our overall capital project priorities. But that's just a thought. So again, different size pixels for different realms within our program delivery. Hope that made sense.
It does. Thank you. Matt, why don't you go ahead, and then Andrew.
Oh, thanks. I do think that, I thank you for the questions, Director. And I think that it's important to note that these elements of the strategic plan, the work that is supporting what the strategic plan directs, is at the operational and the tactical levels. And that's what staff is currently doing. And the purpose here, and we'll get into it in a few minutes, is about being able to more finely calibrate the work through our levels of service and our KPIs. And this framework we're talking about that I'll illustrate is going to help the board and our constituents see the connections between all of these plans, projects, all the independent things that are working to deliver our services. There's a hierarchy there. There are relationships there that roll up to service delivery. And so because we have a new district, because we have new purposes, because we have an expanded mission, this is an opportunity to build that out so we can talk efficiencies. How can we deliver our services more efficiently over time? Thanks. I think, Andrew, you had a question too.
Yeah, just very briefly regarding cost. When we originally scoped this project for $200,000, $150,000 of that was specifically targeted at levels of service. And the reason that I bring that up is because while levels of service are iterative, it's sort of a living document. We did a pretty big push, I think it was about 5 years ago, with the legacy district boards to come up with some strategic service statements and a few KPIs and things. But our mission has expanded, right? And so that's an effort that is going to be bigger this time around than it likely will ever be in the future. Because in many ways we're not starting from scratch, but we're starting as a new organization to establish those. And so I would imagine that in the future, the level of effort to refine those or update those is going to be a lot smaller, which is going to bring down the overall cost of this project in the long run, I would think.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Andrew. Well, I think we do have some flexibility, and I think it's well worth our time as staff bringing this back to the board before we really kick off, right? There, at the front end of the effort with the contractor, we will be able to sort of define that planning horizon. And so this conversation has been really helpful. I do want to, if there's any other comments from the board, now it would be great. And I also want to leave some space for Mr. Stevens if he had any questions. Oh, Director Ralston, thank you.
Yeah, real quick question, or maybe a thought is, as we go through and we listen to what Colin and the team have to offer us, one thing that we might do as individuals is be looking for opportunities for the board to engage at different levels of the comprehensive framework, both kind of at whether we stay at the tactical and operational, only focus the board efforts in the strategic or the comprehensive plan, but look for areas where the board could be effective and be useful as we go through the rest of these descriptions tonight. We're not going to have the time as a board to work at every level of all these plans, tactical, operational, et cetera, nor should we. But I would just suggest keep your eyes open for where you think the board can best contribute as we go through the framework. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, anything on this part of the conversation? Okay, thank you. Matt, why don't you go ahead? Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thanks for the great discussion so far, everyone. I'm going to run through a few slides to get into some of the details here. And thank you, Director Ralston, for that comment about getting into each individual plan, each individual project. We've done, I think, a good job here trying to stay out of the weeds and to try to stay at a general level so that we can build a foundation for future conversations. This is about starting this work and approaching it from a level where we can engage with the board and have good discussions about a lot of detailed information. So I want to walk through what it looks like to have a comprehensive framework and to advance our levels of service towards a strategic plan. And I'll start with the project purpose. That the purpose of this, as Colin said earlier, is to align the district strategies, operations, and tactics within a service-centered framework that illustrates how we are meeting our district purposes and our mission, vision, values. And so the components of that work will be the comprehensive planning framework that we've talked about so far, the levels of service, and the strategic plan as the outcome. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through each of these components to talk about what they mean and how we're going to approach getting them developed. So for a comprehensive planning framework, as the board, starting in January or February, I assume you're asking questions like what projects and programs are we implementing and how are these projects and programs related? And so we've got a lot going on, as you're aware. You've already met lots of staff coming to you for board meetings talking about individual projects, myself included. When we talk about strategy level planning and implementation, what we mean are high level documents that really guide the work that we're doing towards a strategic goal. Some examples, I'm being a little bit sneaky here because I am going to use the emergency operations plan as an example. I will be talking to you in a month about that specifically, but it's a good example of a strategic level plan that we're doing. An asset management plan or a watershed improvement plan, as you've heard about, are that kind of plan as well. When we talk about operational level plans, we're talking about how we function and how we work day to day to deliver services. And so some examples that you may have heard of, some of our emergency functional annexes, our operations and maintenance manual, drainage master plans, a facilities plan that you've heard from me multiple times, and I'll be back in July to talk about that as well. And then our tactical level planning, which are really about actions, day-to-day work that we're doing to achieve our operational objectives. And so emergency action plans, levee inspections, safety training. When you hear from us, there is a hierarchy here that we are talking about. When we talk about individual projects, there is a hierarchy that they fit within. And the intention here is to really build that out so that you can reference it. And when we talk about it being centered around a service, the idea is that we use our tactics to achieve operational objectives so that we can achieve a strategic goal so we can deliver our service. And an example that I'll use just to illustrate that relationship is thinking about our service of responding to flood emergencies. Andrew mentioned we'll talk about this as an example, and we'll use this as we walk through. The strategy is really housed in our emergency operations plan. Our operational level work really is, there are multiple tools that define things like how we manage resources during an incident, how our incident management team functions during an incident, how we declare an emergency in the first place, what's the policy there, and then the tactics that roll up to our functioning. What do we do when there's a flood? What are the specific actions? What are the specific actions when we have a drainage emergency or severe weather or heat and smoke? That's how it sort of works its way up to service delivery. And so when we think about great questions coming from the directors about how often can we intervene and review and update our strategic plan, really what's happening is on the tactical level, we're doing that every day. We're updating our tactics whenever we have better or new information that helps us sharpen our tools. Operationally, we're looking at annually or biannually when we need to update our functional tools, and our strategies really get updated from a strategic level, could be 3 to 5 years typically. And what's important to note about a framework here is that we have multiple services and we have multiple strategies that achieve each service. And so for district purposes and service delivery, There is a hierarchy, as I said, and in this work, the planning framework will really help us to illustrate that hierarchy. And my hope is that down the road, someone, maybe me, will come to you and talk about our continuity of operations plan. And as a group, the board will say, aha, I know where that fits in this hierarchy. This is going to help us achieve this service delivery, and this is how we're going to measure that. So when we talk about measuring that work, what we're talking about are levels of service. And so Andrew, as the lead for levels of service, great conversation already. So I'm going to invite Andrew to jump in to add some context here if needed. But when we're talking about levels of service, the board might be asking, when we talk about our projects and our programs, how much service do we provide in a strategic planning timeline? So let's say we're talking about a 3 to 5 year period, and we want to prioritize service delivery. How much are we delivering for flood emergencies? How much do we need to invest to improve or to meet our level of service for helping reduce flood emergencies or respond to flood emergencies? And then how do we evaluate our performance? Levels of service work at each level of planning that I talked about earlier. So at the strategy level, levels of service are a measurable target, a smart measurable target for strategic goals. At an operational level, those targets are used to design each program or project. And then at a tactical level, they're used to guide tactical actions and implementation. So the way that we do our work on the ground is informed. That information rolls up to our operations. That information rolls up to our strategies. So going back to responding to flood emergencies as an example, when we think about how we evaluate this service, and we think about levels of service for emergency operations, we might think of a strategic level of service as wanting to respond to all flood emergencies within 24 hours, for example. That could be the level of service we're providing to our constituents. Operationally, in order to do that, we need to be able to support and coordinate what we call a level 3 incident response team. Level 1 is major incident that involves all the jurisdictions around. A level 5 I would compare to something that our ops team does regularly, involves a few people handling emergencies. They're doing it all the time. They're amazing. So for what we do with our incident management team, a level 3 incident response team is the level that we expect to provide. And a tactical level of service might be that in order to do that and be good at it, we need to have at least 2 incident management trainings per year. So as we start to flesh this out, we're showing that there's a relationship that we're monitoring and maintaining on a daily, weekly, monthly, and annual level to assure that our services are being delivered as efficiently as possible. Now, bringing these things together, we recognize that there are multiple services and we have multiple strategic levels of service. And so we start to see the hierarchy and the framework start to form. And as we think about levels of service, all of this information rolls up to the strategic level of service. And that's a really important area for board input and board feedback. That information goes into what directs our work over time, and it allows us to ask ourselves, are we doing what we say we're going to do? Do we need to change our tactics or our operations or our strategies in order to achieve the level of service that we've indicated to our customers? Now, all of that information is how we would package our strategic plan. And so whether it's a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan or a 2-year plan, that's really up to us to tailor to determine how often our strategic levels of service need to change. But that would be the outcome of this project, would be to take the information that we've built in a framework, bring in and update the already great work that Andrew and his team have done for levels of service, bring all of that together so that we have an ability to roll up our tactical information into our operations and our strategies, and then be able to communicate to the board where we think we should invest to improve over the next few years. So this is where I think we'll really hit the ground when we work with our consultant who's going to help. Really, they're not going to do all of the work. They're going to work with Andrew and myself and Colin and so many members of our team to look at what we've already done, identify where there are gaps in the framework, start to make recommendations on where we could fill those gaps, and again, get back to those concepts of calibration, efficiency, and being better at delivering the services that we're supposed to deliver. So with that, I'll give it back to Colin.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I would like to stop at this point to see if there's, oh, and I think I saw Director Ralston put his hand up.
Go ahead,
Uh,
Colin, finish your
No,
thought.
I just wanted to open this up for some conversation. Appreciation to Matt for laying out how we're basically nesting and building the strategic plan effort, and wanted to see if there's any questions.
I've got a real quick one. Matt, if you could roll back to the example slide with the reduced flood risk. And what I'd like to call out for the board is this is a good example where you might look at this and say, what's an appropriate place for the board to have influence or oversight in this level of service? And you might look at, wow, at every one of those levels, the board might have some interest. I would suggest that depending on the service, we may want to dive into an operational element that has a really important, critical key performance indicator that drives a level of service. Other services that the district provides, we may only want to be interested in the strategic level. So I would encourage you, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is keep your mind open about where the board could have some input. But I want to thank you guys for producing a framework that has a vocabulary that we can use consistently and talk about. This, it really helps me. So that's the end of my comment. But I did want to check in with Directors Mueller, King, and Lane. We haven't heard from you tonight, and just want to check in to see if there's anything in particular that you haven't had a chance to jump in and comment on. And then the last thing I want to double check in on, we're about halfway through our time, and I want to just check to see if you all feel like we're on the right path, right kind of level of discussion tonight. But let's go to Directors Mueller, King, and Lane. Do you guys have any particular comments that you haven't had a chance to make yet?
I don't really have any comments. I'm just trying to absorb it all and understand what's being said.
Director Lane?
Thanks. I'm kind of in the same boat as Director King. I'm taking it all in. I appreciate the conversation. It's fascinating. As we've been talking about the potential duration of the strategic plan, yeah, I'm thinking about that a little bit, and certainly want to think about it more and talk to y'all more about it. I appreciate the spirit of continuous improvement that I think is embodied in having a shorter plan and testing things out and feeling our way. I also might lean a little bit more toward what I think of as like a more standard 5-year plan. That's a time step that I've come across in other strategic plans anyway. Just because I think the types of things that should be in a strategic plan are big enough and high enough level that I wouldn't necessarily expect us to see a bunch of actionable results and change over a much shorter time period. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but it's kind of where my gut takes me. If we have a higher level, strategic elements in our plan, then some of those and I'm still working on the vocabulary, but some of those sub elements, I think, would be more amenable to cracking open and looking at on a shorter time span. That's my initial thinking.
Well, I guess from my perspective, I think about this somewhat from my city role, and much of it is familiar, particularly as it relates to capital improvement plans feeding into an ongoing process. In terms of checking in or along the way, I guess in my head, the annual budget process sort of forces a consideration every year in terms of, well, where are we allocating our resources for the coming 12 months? And allocating those resources presumably is going to be toward service delivery. And that may cause us to revisit, well, we had a service delivery gap last year because we didn't have enough resources related to this particular priority. That provides some degree of kind of recalibrating on a more frequent than 5-year basis. But I tend to agree with some of the comments from Director Lane in terms of that strategic plan horizon. The items are probably large enough that they're not going to change frequently enough to necessarily need to replan more frequently than that. And then the slide that just disappeared was going to be where my last comment was, which is
It's my fault. Thank you, Matt.
That's all right. No, that's all right. But just as our vice chair had commented about what level the board at, my bias is there needs to be a damn good reason that we would venture below the strategic level on an item. From my viewpoint, that's what we pay Jim to manage the staff and the operations managers to manage their teams to do. Now, if we're from a board standpoint, we're evaluating that we're failing on a strategic level, and it's because there's an operational aspect that's failing. That's an issue that we better have addressed with Jim. And if he's not making progress on that, then maybe that requires some other kind of action. But my bias is I don't have an expertise in operating pumps or the proper slope and grading of water retainment levee structures, or the conveyance of water, or the engineering design. To me, those are all the operational expertises that we get from our valuable staff. And so my inclination is going to be to say, well, the board role is at that strategic, in this slide example, emergency operations plan and above, and rare exception that it would go below that. And I can't at this point think of a reason why we would ever be in the tactical unless we're out there with Phil helping to fill the sandbags as volunteers. Anyway, you asked for my comments. It's dangerous because then I get on a roll. So thank you.
Now, these are really good comments. Are we just testing real quick? Are we doing okay as a conversation? Is this valuable for y'all, or do we need to shift gears? Just kind of thumbs up. Everything
Very
going
valuable.
well?
Very valuable. Thank you. And
Okay.
let's have Matt maybe respond to Director Mueller and then Director Eisenbeis.
Thanks, Director Mueller. I just thought of an example of where the board's input on an operational level. In this example, if the community asks us to respond to more or to larger incidents, or to take the lead or have the authority for larger incidents, that would be a significant investment and shift in our capabilities and capacity that would have an immediate budget impact. And so while I don't think we would necessarily have the board necessarily leading on recommending operational level, I do think that there's a possibility we could be asking for direction and guidance there. And that's an example that I think maybe some agencies who have a broader emergency scope will face. If someone says we need more protection, we need you guys to double your team and have more equipment and more capacity, that would be a good example. So thank you for the comment.
Thanks, Matt. Director Eisenbeis.
Thanks, Colin. So I just want to voice something that I'm struggling with a little bit, and I hope you can sort of cure my confusion, which is, and I think the answer to this may really vary depending on the type of service we're talking about, but my frame of reference for levels of service is in my other personal volunteer time, I'm involved with an update to a transportation system plan. So there's been a lot of discussion about levels of service for different kinds of transportation infrastructure. And I think not unlike that, the district operates a lot of infrastructure, right? And so when we talk about things like the level of flood protection, or in this particular case, the slide we're looking at, responding to flood emergencies within 24 hours, we may be talking about services that the district does not necessarily execute too often in the case of responding to a flood emergency, right? Like hopefully we're not encountering flood emergencies very often. Or if we're talking about setting an aspirational level of service that has to do with capital investments, it's something that really takes a long time horizon to try to meet. So I'm just wondering how those kinds of levels of service fit with a strategic plan effort. I don't think that, I do think they work together. I guess the upshot for me is I would lean more toward a traditional 5-year strategic plan than a shorter time horizon for strategic plans. But I also hope that there will be enough continuity that we can consider levels of service for items where, we're not going to be sort of reinventing the wheel every time we update the strategic plan.
Andrew, why don't I take a first crack and then go into it from there? I will say that there's a real elegance in putting these pieces together, even from a timeline perspective, where working with the board and with the contractor to establish our strategic initiatives, the goal for this effort is to have those ahead of budget development for fiscal year FY27. And after establishing those strategic priorities, really building out the level of service to have basically the performance indicators of how we're making progress on those probably handful of initiatives. The level of service is broader than that. So it's a combined effort with this strategic planning effort kind of coming out of the gate. But the level of service effort does need to be broader. It's not just on those strategic priorities. It's on the sort of infrastructure and service delivery that we need. So there should be a direct line between those strategic initiatives and level of service, but you'll also see that it is a broader set of services that we're establishing those level of service for. Andrew, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. Really, really good discussion. Lots of things just popping up for me, and there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out in terms of the way that the board engages. Yeah, really appreciate the differentiation of like where and how the board fits in, and we talked about turning the knob a little bit. And I don't want to throw in new terminology, but this strategic level of service, we could have an operational level of service, tactical level of service, but the strategic level of service is often spoke of as a customer level of service. So this may not be the right terminology for our organization, but this is what our customers or our stakeholders can expect for the money that they contribute to our organization. And we talked about maturation early on, and this is something that we ran into with the legacy boards when we were having a discussion about strategic levels of service, which is what do our I'm going to use the word stakeholders, I guess. Please give me a better word if there is one. What do our stakeholders expect of us as an organization? And we as staff can have some idea, informed professional opinion about what that might be. And then you as the boards as elected representatives also may have a broader perspective on what our stakeholders need from us. but there, I think, is also a need to ask what our community needs and expects of us. I think it's easier. We're not super in the public eye, so some people don't even know that we exist. And so it's an interesting conversation to have with people that live or work or operate in the floodplain is like, what is your expectation for us? And I don't think once that strategic level of service is set, it can be refined and tweaked, but um, sorry, I don't know everybody's last name. I'm trying to figure out how uh, 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 Director Eisbeiss, you spoke to changing the levels of service during the strategic plan, and I think a lot of organizations would put the levels of service sort of above the strategic plan. So we've got our statute and our mission, vision, values. And then our levels of service really informs what our stakeholders can expect from us as an organization to deliver. And then the strategic plan is a 5-year outlook of how we're going to do that or what we're going to focus on for the next 5 years in those deliveries. So we could pull levels of service out of the strategic plan and have it be separate because we're not revising those necessarily every 5 years in the way that we're like, okay, cool, new 5 years, what are we going to do? Those are probably going to be pretty steady, and we can move the needle on them a little bit and refine them over time. So yeah, does that make sense how we could pull those out, or the depth of revision in those is a lot smaller than the strategic plan itself is going to be, or I think theoretically should be. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah,
Maybe
it
I'm
does.
off.
Well, yeah, no, I appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah.
Director Eisenbeis, does that get to some of what you were asking?
Yes, that
Okay.
that makes sense to me. I appreciate that, at least speaking for my part, but I'd be
Yeah.
curious as to the perspective of other board members.
Well, this has been very helpful from a staff perspective. I know I do before moving, we have one last little piece, which is some summary with a bit of some key takeaways. I did want to pause for a second to see Mr. Stevens, if there's anything, any questions or comments that you would want to make. Okay, thumbs up. Thank you. Well, thank you all for digging into this. I know that there's sort of this series of, the process that you have to go through, but I think what is really exciting from a staff perspective is that this really is the direct line between you as our board members and our policymakers and really what we're implementing and doing. So it is process heavy, but it is also action oriented. So a huge amount of appreciation for having this discussion here. A few of the key takeaways from the beginning, we have been doing planning, right? So this is our kind of formal beginning of pulling all those things together into a framework. But we have been doing really well established plans, some of that coming with support from the federal government, review from FEMA, having some of the best geotechnical engineers being able to contribute to that effort. So that opportunity to build this framework really will make us more effective and more efficient and be able to deliver more of the services that the public expect of us. I did also want to note some pieces around the timeline on this and I think that might be a nice place to have a little bit more conversation and maybe it's not a final kind of decision here, but as far as the planning horizon, that might be a nice way to close out here. But I think really that statement around adaptive management and the maturation process is something we really want you as board members to take away, that we are in a good place now. So it's maybe one of the best places to kind of be planning from, right? Like we have this publicly supported general obligation bond. We have this great set of plans. that we are implementing. So it gives us the space to do some good planning, to really think about the broader set of purposes that this district has and make really good plans on how to implement them. So we're in a good place now, and we'll continue to improve. We are in the strategic planning process. This really is a kickoff with the board. I want to give some appreciation to Director Ralston for noting that we're in the process. The RFP for the consultant is live. It is linked, and you can take a look at it in the memo that was sent out by Wendy earlier or last week. That also includes one of the tasks. You can go through and see some of the tasks. You'll see that one of the tasks there is really for internal stakeholder engagement, with the board being a key part of it. So something that would be great to hear from you all is how can we, as your planning team, make the most of your board interactions and make sure that yeah, you have the engagement that you're looking for, and really being able to direct this effort. And then I touched on this before, but this effort is really focused on sort of connecting with some of our budget planning process that we need to do. So we have, we're looking that later this, basically this winter, December and January, of having the strategic plan completed. So that front loads a lot of effort and conversations. So you will be hearing from us and seeing us. After we've established that, that will go to the board, or sorry, to staff as we develop our budgets. So you'll again see it, and you should be able to draw a direct line between your strategic plan and what staff proposes in the budget that we're going to accomplish in the coming year. As we're doing that, we'll also be developing the level of service so that we'll be able to report to you not just at budget time, but throughout the year, how we are making progress on those initiatives. Director Collins.
Yeah, I think that kind of weaved it together for me, Colin. And this conversation has overall, I really appreciate everyone's perspective of just understanding where where we'll have opportunities. And I think it's like the KPIs ultimately of like where we're measuring how we're doing what we said we were going to do relative to our priorities overall, and then how we set our budget against that. So I think of questions like, where can we produce greater urgency if we see something falling off track? And that's probably in the budget cycle to some degree to support, certain projects. So I think in my earlier questions of like, this kind of exploration of time horizon, the 5 years seems to make sense at the strategic level, especially given that it will include our new mandates that haven't been included in the past for planning. So we'll have an opportunity to do those now. I can't, based on what we've talked about or my experience so far, anticipate where that would be off in 5 years, just because they're such steadfast parts of what we do. So just to close out my earlier questions, I appreciate everyone's perspective.
That's really helpful. I think we've heard a few board members saying that the 5-year time horizon makes sense. I think there's support for that from staff as well, and wanted to put that out for further discussion, and just emphasizing any time horizon that is preferred by the board will still be going through the alignment process. So, 5 years makes sense. And if there's a different timeline that's preferred, that also works well for us. Yeah, any other comments? Or Director Ralston, I don't know, so you're chairing this, if there are no decisions being made in this meeting, so how you would like to approach consensus, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not even sure we need consensus, maybe a little more clarity on schedule. And I just want to remind folks that I have a couple of scheduled items. One is Friday, some of us will be on tour. Then the next meeting we have is until July 17th. We're skipping August board meeting, I think is still the plan. So after July 17th, we're not going to be together until mid-September, I think is the plan, Jim. So relative to strategic planning and preparing us for the budget cycle, um, I'm not sure you have any answers now about how we as board members can prepare ourselves within this context to be ready in September to really dive in. If you have any advice for us, or maybe the advice is simply if, as board members, we have questions and further comments about the strategic plan framework, the comprehensive plan, this whole introduction, that we contact, Jim or Colin directly initially, and feel free to have conversations and sort of build up our knowledge and our comfort where this is going to go. So when we all reconvene in either July or September on this topic again, we're progressing a little bit, and we're not just sort of starting over at that point. That would be my I guess caution and encouragement would be to stay engaged on this topic if you'd like to, outside of the board meeting context. And I'll turn it over to Jim to respond to my comments.
Yeah, thanks. And Colin, correct me when I get off track. But we'll have a contract approval for you, I hope, in September for this work. And that'll be your opportunity to weigh in on the scope that the staff has negotiated with the planners. We'll have some iteratively improved CIP criteria for you in that same timeframe. And we'll have a fall budget discussion. And Lori Baker, please jump in, where we're going to talk broadly about priorities to inform staff's fall thinking about budgeting. So that'll be a chance for you to give us some broad direction. You'll be hearing updates on the facilities plan, on the watershed plan, that are really data frameworks that are going to feed into this. So I guess what I would say is, even though we may not meet in August, there'll be a chance for me to work with you. And I would ask that if you have questions about this framework or input, I know Colin and Matt and Andrew would love to sit down and chat with you individually or in small groups. And obviously we'll follow public meetings law and all the appropriate notice and all of that as we need to. But I would ask you to reach out to Colin, and if you can copy me so I'm aware, that would be helpful. But we'd love your additional input. You'll see a contract approval in September, and then that work will get started. And there'll be some hard work in the fall as we bring you iterative examples of that to get approved. And then we move into January, where you'll be giving me final direction, and we'll come back with Lori and a proposed budget for you in the spring. So that's sort of the broad sequence.
Jim, yes, so that's correct. I think there's a board retreat that's being planned, and so part of that will be to solicit some of your feedback and have some engagement, and that again is a direct tie-in to the budget development that Lori will be leading. And then what would be most helpful right now is taking a look and being familiar with, you can click on that link that's in the memo. I can actually just put it into the chat. Do I have the capability to do that? Yes. And so being familiar with that, and as Jim said, if there was any questions or further conversations you would want, that would be really appreciated. We want to really know how we can make the most out of our the board interactions. I know that there's limited time that you have together, and you have a lot to take care of. So anything to make that useful and efficient is going to be very appreciated by staff. And let me put this in here. No, I did not get the link. I only got the word. 1 second, please.
Colin's working on the cut and paste. I guess this is an editorial comment. So Chair or Mr. Vice Chair, please brush me back if I need it. I guess I want to assure you that particularly with the capital program, the district and all of its partners spent a considerable amount of time and effort identifying the deficiencies in the levees and the pumping system. And we have a set of known deficiencies and a set of projects that we know we need to implement, that we've spent many years identifying and developing the revenue to build stuff that's going to respond to the assessments and detailed work we've done. within the group of projects and deficiencies that we know we need to address, there's some room for sequencing changes and dealing with the uncertainty of federal, local, and state funding. But all the work that we've identified that needs to be done to the system needs to be done. And what I'm most excited about and what I want to really assure you about is the work that we are going to be focused on as a staff for the next couple of years is design work on these projects that we know need to be built. So the dollars that we are spending today are based on a very detailed, thoughtful, deliberate, risk-based framework. And so for the next couple of years, the work is clear. What this work will do will help us be more transparent and more accountable to you and to the public if we're not making adequate progress. So helping us really target those measures that say we're really making good progress on the promises that we've made is the most important thing I think you can do as a board, is to use your public perspective, your relationships with key stakeholders to help us build a set of metrics and dials and dashboards for our activities that give people confidence that we're doing a good job, and that if we're not doing a good job, we're held accountable, or that we are capable of explaining why we've encountered challenges that require change or correction or additional resource or adaptive management in some fashion. So I'll stop there. Thank you for the opportunity to editorialize.
Well said, Jim. We have 10 minutes or less. I'd like to check in on two things. Is there anything anybody would like to say? Any of the directors that you haven't had a chance to get on the table yet tonight? And if not, slightly different perspective. I think this is the second work session we've had. First one I think was one of the budget work sessions. Is this the kind of forum or the kind of approach to taking on a topic in a work session that you were hoping for? You can make a comment now if you like, or think about it over the next few days and have a reaction to this forum, this style of board interaction, and certainly get back to the chair, myself, Jim, talk to your colleagues about if you'd like this kind of workshop tweaked or changed. If you'd like more of them, if you'd like fewer of them, whatever. But I think this is only the second one we've had. I find it useful and gives us a chance just to kick things around. So it's hard to do in a regular business meeting. Anybody have any initial comments about this as a work session? Nick?
Yeah, this works well for me. I appreciate the I don't know if it's less formal, but I'm sitting here in a t-shirt on my couch, so it's easier for me than going someplace. Not that I don't love getting together with you all in person too. It mixes it up a little bit. It's a little bit more accessible when we all have busy days. So I think it's a great way to squeeze a little bit more out of the limited time that we have, and the different, format and approach, I think helps out different board members with different stuff going on outside of the district's work.
Great, thanks. Director Calkins?
Yeah, I really appreciate it as well. And certainly not just from like kind of a educational standpoint, but I think part of the goal, and this is maybe a question for staff, is are we offering you value to do your work even better so that you can help us meet our goals for the community better? So that's, I think the question to me is like, is it too much preparation or does it fit in your work stream well? Because I certainly have appreciated it from a board standpoint to have the dialogue, and would want to continue it if it's of value to you all.
Paula?
I'm enjoying it, and I think our challenge is trying to make the best use of the limited time that we have with you. So we appreciate that you're willing to work an evening and use an alternative format and tape record it, or I guess that's really old-fashioned, record it. So yeah, we're hungry to engage with you guys and to understand where you want to go, and trying to provide the right amount of recommendation from staff while not usurping your ability as elected and appointed officials, which is brand new to us, to guide our actions. We're searching for that sweet spot. So we appreciate your support for that. Feels good.
Good. I'm going to make one last request. Mr. Stevens, do you have any comments before we adjourn?
No, thank you, Chair. Just a great meeting. I just did a strategic plan with City of Gresham on the Planning Commission, so I can understand where you guys are coming from. Great information. I'm really looking forward to seeing where you're going in the area. That's awesome. You guys are doing some great work. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for taking your time to be with us. I think with that, hearing no other comments or objections, we will adjourn and we'll be back together again officially July 17. Meeting adjourned. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks all.
Thank
See you
you all.
guys.
Good night, everybody.
See,
Take care.
see some of you Friday on the tour.
Yeah, looking forward to that.